During the night of June 5th and 6th, 1944, two U.S. Army airborne divisions, the 82nd and the 101st, conducted airborne operations in Normandy, France as part of Operation Overlord. These two units were created less than 2 years before, in the summer of 1942. In part one of a series, this film highlights the first few months in the journeys of these two divisions from activation to Normandy by focusing on recruiting and training. When German forces invaded Poland in September 1939, Japanese troops had already been fighting in Manchuria and China for 2 years. Like many countries around the world, the United States was not ready to go to war. The U.S. Army had fewer than 200,000 soldiers, including the numbers for the Army Air Forces, and ranked 39th in the world. By spring 1940, the United States remained in an isolationist mode on the sidelines, but had started to prepare. The size of the military grew, as did the manufacturing base to increase the production of ships, aircraft, tanks, and trucks. These changes prepared U.S. forces to counter new types of warfare, included those used by the Axis powers like Blitzkrieg or Lightning War, in which German forces used new tactics and weapons to concentrate offensive weapons, disrupt enemy defenses, bypass resistance, and create psychological shock to achieve quick victories. One of the new warfare elements used in World War II was airborne operations, which included both troops that dropped into the battlefield by parachute and troops who rode into the battlefield by glider. Airborne was first used in warfare by Soviet forces in Finland in January 1940, and by German forces in Norway and Denmark in April 1940, and in Belgium and the Netherlands in May 1940. Developed in the 1920s and 1930s, including in Germany, Italy, the Soviet Union, and the United Kingdom, the United States did not seriously start pursuing building this capability until the spring of 1940, when the U.S. Army created an airborne test platoon. The first parachute jump for this platoon was on August 16, 1940. The successes of German airborne forces helped speed up the U.S. Army's efforts. By the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the U.S. Army had created 3 parachute infantry battalions and 1 air landing or glider battalion. With the U.S. now a combatant in the war, efforts to expand the U.S. military increased exponentially. By the spring of 1942, an airborne command was created to oversee the development, training, and equipping of the U.S. Army's airborne capabilities. In August 1942, the first 2 of 5 airborne divisions were activated, the 82nd and the 101st. The other 3 divisions were activated over the next few months. The U.S. Army had to recruit and train personnel to man these 2 airborne divisions, along with all the other formations. Because of the additional inherent danger expected for the units, at least initially, men had to volunteer to join the airborne troops. Based on a rigorous screening process, less than 20% of those who volunteered were deemed physically and psychologically fit for these forces, which made the need for volunteers even greater. There were many techniques used to recruit men for these new units with dangerous missions. One way was through a publicity campaign, including recruiting posters, magazine and newspaper articles, and newsreels. Here is one of those early newsreels. This one is from 1941.
Springtime in Georgia and jump time for Uncle Sam's new 501st Parachute Battalion. 70 of them in this mass demonstration. Officers called jump masters in new Army lingo make the all-important inspection, for each man's life depends on exactly correct preparation. Equipment planes carry parachute-supported machine guns and heavy equipment, and one equipment ship accompanies each 6 personnel planes. A lesson learned from Europe's war. Here is the real thing, Norway just a year ago. These are actual pictures of Nazi parachutists in their sky invasion, and these jumpers paved the way for greater parachute feats in Holland and Belgium. Now, over here, 1941 parachute troop drills. Led by the equipment plane, big long-range transports take the air. Heavy equipment first aimed to land on the exact rendezvous point below. Now, out and over. High-speed jumping. The American technique calls for split-second timing and breathtaking precision. The military world first heard of parachute troops from American experiments made before the last war. Today, hundreds are being safely trained for our streamlined forces. Landed right on the pre-selected spot, jumpers find their parachute-dropped equipment on hand and ready. Overhead, U.S. pursuit planes are in position to lay smoke screens to hide the flying infantrymen. Advance. America's Army steps ahead in the new lessons of defense.
This May 12, 1941 cover and article in Life magazine featuring the difficult training requirements of U.S. Army paratroopers inspired Carlwood Lipton of Band of Brothers fame to volunteer for the Airborne. Other men joined because of this article and others like it, but there were many motivations that inspired men to volunteer for these units.
Life magazine in 1941, early, they did an article on the paratroopers. And Hal Allen and I both, who was my high school friend, they impressed us, and we both decided that's where we wanted to be. So when we volunteered in the Army, we volunteered for the paratroopers.
When war was declared, well, they put another letter on the bulletin board down there. They wanted men for the glider troops, glider pilots, and they wanted paratroopers. There wasn't any paratroopers prior to that. So that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to a new field. And I asked somebody what a glider pilot was, and they says, man that flies a plane without a motor. I said, that ain't for me. So I joined the parachute troops.
One of the things that was an incentive back in those days, if and after you qualified to be a paratrooper, you got $50 a month more. So at that time, when you went in as a recruit, you got $50. As a paratrooper, you would get $100, and that was pretty good money.
And then the recruits had to be trained. Primary tasks included physical fitness, weapons, land navigation, hand-to-hand combat, and soldier skills training. The main training areas for airborne units were sites around the southeastern United States, including Fort Benning and Toccoa, Georgia, Camp Blanding, Florida, and Fort Bragg and Camp McCall, North Carolina. This newsreel from 1941 featured some of the grueling training that airborne volunteers performed.
New training equipment at Fort Benning, Georgia. Parachute pupils are drawn to the top of a tower 250 feet high. The first training operation is that kind of descent. They get used to a parachute. Easy way first. The second operation, the pupil is in a position such as in actual jumping, and he gets accustomed to the jerk when a parachute opens. Then practicing how to land, important for a parachute soldier. And finally, they're launched for a descent on their own. Troops from the sky acquire new importance in modern war, and the Army is training them in an up-to-date way. He makes a perfect landing, and now is ready to try it from a plane in the sky.
No matter why the men volunteered for airborne forces, they all agreed that the training was tough.
Physical training for parachute troops. They get in shape for the dizzy lead sky. In camp at Fort Benning, Georgia, the 503rd Battalion of paratroops tries out a new type of gigantic apparatus called the Trainasium, a novel contraption providing the nimblest kind of athletics to develop muscular power and flexible agility. Parachute soldiers who jump from planes and float down to earth need a maximum of nimble strength. Jumping exercise is necessary preparation for the parachute leap of the soldiers of the sky.
So you were one of the first Toccoa enlistees.
Yes, I got there when it was first, the tents were set up. We had to build our own obstacle course and build our own equipment.
Now I believe there was a, part of the training was a significant event that you had to perform. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think you're talking about the run up Mount Currahee. Mount Currahee is the Indian name meaning standing alone. And we all said we stood alone together. But we would run that every day and then come back for 2 hours of calisthenics and on the obstacle course and then go with our regular training.
Now Currahee, I believe, at least from Stephen Ambrose's book that I mentioned before, became the motto for the whole 506 regiment.
Yes, that was our emblem actually. We had a little Currahee pin we wore with 506.
Now how would you evaluate your training?
The best. I think it was the best. We were top-notch soldiers. We had very rough physicals. They concentrated on the physical aspect of it. And we had runs in the heat, and besides the run up Currahee. It was.
Now this is your basic training.
This was basic training.
This is even before.
Before we went to jump school. Back when we got to jump school, the first phase was physical education, and we were so good that they bypassed that with the rest of them. They said we didn't need it.
It was vigorous. It was very vigorous training. And should say, going through the towers and being dropped down, that was fun. I thought that was fun. Then they had a fuselage up above the ground, about 20 feet or so, with an open door and a pulley and a cable. And then you put on this harness and hook up to that cable and jump out this door. Now that's the most scariest jump I ever made, I think. And some guys washed out right there.
Oh my.
You know. But then once done it was fun. You just jump out this, go sliding down to us, you know, and then there was sawdust to catch it.
We had jump training, which, because we had all the preliminaries at Toccoa, only lasted for 3 weeks. You know, the first week was parachute packing and physical training and things of that sort, and some torture machines that they had rigged up to
have you been
teach you how to tumble and how to drop and how to twist.
But how many parachute landing falls do you think you did in those first couple of weeks?
Oh Lord, I don't know. It was how many? Did you ever stop? I guess into the hundreds, maybe the thousands. But you know, there was so much of that I can still do it. You know, here at the ripe old age of 82, I can still do all those crazy things. And remember how they were done.
How much?
I remember it was more of a torture than it was a training, or I would say it combined torture and training together, and it made you determined, and that was what they were trying to do, is make us determined, and they succeeded, really.
You remember going up the 250-foot tower?
Oh yes, yeah.
What was it like the first time you hung up there? You know,
well,
you come up that tower and all of a sudden you get up on top and you're just looking around bending.
You'd say to yourself, "Good Lord, why am I here?" You know, why to get myself into this crazy mess?
8 months after it was activated, the 82nd Airborne Division was shipped overseas, while the 101st Airborne Division continued training in the United States. Sent to Morocco in North Africa, the 82nd arrived on May 10, 1943, within days of the German surrender. The division stayed in North Africa and continued preparing for war. Like training back in the States, it included parachute and glider operations, patrolling, land navigation, and physical fitness. just under a year before Operation Overlord, the 82nd Airborne Division joined the fight. The unit first jumped into Sicily as part of Operation Husky on July 9, 1943. 2 months later, on September 13, 1943, the 82nd participated in another operational airborne mission. This time, the division jumped into drop zones near Salerno, Italy as part of Operation Avalanche. While most of the 82nd was pulled out of Italy within a few weeks to begin movement to the United Kingdom and to start preparing for Operation Overlord, the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment remained in Italy for a few additional months. Meanwhile, having completed its train-up in the United States, the 101st Airborne Division relocated to the United Kingdom in September 1943 to get ready for Overlord. By the winter of 1944, both the 82nd and 101st were in the UK, training, performing practice jump or glider operations, integrating new personnel, rehearsing with their Army Air Force units, and participating in realistic exercises, all part of the rehearsals for Operation Overlord.